Gentlemen, I'm going to have you introduce yourself in the order that I have in the agenda. Good? All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in the world, or if you're watching a recording of this, welcome as well. Um, you may have joined us earlier on and watched some of the presentation by some of the esteemed panelists, or you may have not, and you're joining us for the first time. Regardless, you are most welcome to this session. What we're going to kick off is what is known as a super panel. I have to admit, the first time I saw that, I wasn't sure what was super about the panel, and then I saw the panelist names and the companies they were associated with, and I think that's what's going to make it really super. So it's going to be 2 hours, but I'm sure time's going to fly by because there's going to be a lot of rich content, a lot of rich debates and discussions. Um, but what we're going to do today is break today's session up into a couple of sections to make it more digestible and consumable. But before I talk about the agenda, let me have the panelists introduce themselves. Some of them you may have seen if you were with us earlier, and some may be new to you. So let's start. We'll kick off with Anil. Anil, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. This is Anil Bhandari. I'm with Altiostar, responsible for product management. And just briefly, Altiostar is a supplier of virtual RAN software.
Excellent. Thank you, Anil. And next up, we will go to, sorry. The next up, we will go to Stefano. Stefano, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stefano Cantarelli. I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Mavenir. Mavenir is the end-to-end cloud-native network software provider, and we play a big role in the OpenRAN space.
Excellent. Thank you, Stefano. Alex, up next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexander Chassaigne from Telefónica. I'm part of the global CTIO team in the OpenRAN and new radio solutions, taking care of mainly standardizations in both 3GPP and ORAN Alliance.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. And then after Alex, Andy, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm part of Vodafone Group Services, specifically in network technology, where I lead the OpenRAN hardware development team.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. Up next, we have Daniele. Daniele, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hello. My name is Daniele Franceschini. I am responsible of the group of technology innovation, standard APR and product portfolio. I'm a direct report of the CTIO team, and we follow all the activities of innovations for domestic Italian market and Brazilian one. And so OpenRAN and all the issues related to the edge and the activities of innovation there.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniele. And let's move on to Anand, whom you may have seen earlier. Anand, would you like to reintroduce yourself, please, to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Roy. It's great to be in this panel. Hello, everyone. I'm Anand Prasad. I bring about 25 something years of experience in telecom and networking security, and from many different companies, Lucent, NEC, things like that. Just to say a couple of points, I was chairman of 3GPP SA3 when 5G security was being decided, and that's the open RAN aspects. And after that, I was in Rakuten Mobile as a CISO, starting all the security stuff in Rakuten Mobile. And now I am a senior security advisor to Docomo for all aspects. But here today, I'm representing Wenovater, my own company, working on telecom security aspects. Thank you very much, Roy, for giving me the chance.
Well, no, thank you, Anand, and welcome back. All right, and finally, you may have just seen him. Let's have Oguz introduce yourself again, please, to the audience. Oguz.
Sure. Thanks, Roy. My name is Oguz Sunay. I'm the Vice President of Research and Development at Open Networking Foundation, which is a non-profit, open source nonprofit organization, all aiming to transform operator networks.
Excellent, thank you, Oguz. Well, we have our 7 panelists just introduce himself, and I think you'll see why now it's a super panel. Let's start by describing how we're going to run today's session. If we could go to the next slide, please. Excellent, thank you, Milad. All right, we are done with introductions, so now you know who's who and what they look like. We're going to break this, as I said, into a couple of different sections. We're going to start with OpenRAN, the ecosystem, then move on to talking about deployments, and then we'll address some of the common myths and misconceptions around OpenRAN, and then finally we'll take a look at the road ahead for OpenRAN. The last part of this will actually have 30 minutes for audience questions, so I would encourage you, as you're listening to the panelists discuss the topic, queue up your questions, put them in the Q&A window in Zoom, and we will address those at the end. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of thoughtful questions as we proceed, and we've reserved a lot of time for the panelists to address those. So let's kick it off and get started with the ecosystem in OpenRAN. Let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, well, let me describe what we're going to talk about briefly, and then I think we can switch to the panelist view so we can see their handsome faces. But what we're going to talk about in this section around the ecosystem is we'll talk about the key ecosystem players, a little bit about the sort of the value chain, the supply chain for OpenRAN, and we'll touch a little bit on open source initiatives and standards. And certainly one of the questions around OpenRAN is the maturity, right? Maturity of different components, the maturity of the platform overall, and what the platform requirements are. So let's get started. So to kick us off, if we could switch to the panel view at this point, Milad, if that's possible. All right, well, we'll get started anyway. So maybe let's address the question of who are the key players in the OpenRAN value chain. And I'd like to direct the questions first to Anil, and maybe Daniele, you could think about your contribution as Anil's getting us started. Anil, go ahead. Who are the key players in the OpenRAN value chain?
Thanks for the question. So with OpenRAN, the RAN is getting decomposed into various elements. So there is COTS hardware, which is hosting the RAN software, cloud platform software, then the vRAN software itself, and then the ORUs. So what we have seen is, in last 1.5 to 2 years, we have seen emergence of strong players in each of these areas. So I'm just, as an example, I'm saying on the COTS hardware side, we have obviously vendors like Dell, Supermicro, Quanta, HP, etc. On cloud platform side, to name a few, there are companies like Red Hat, Cisco, VMware, who are providing the cloud platforms. And then on ORU side, these are the players who have developed radios supporting open front haul interface as specified by ORAN. So companies like, some are really big companies like NEC, Fujitsu, and then other medium to small players have emerged like Gigaterra, MTI, Comba Telecom, STL. And then on the vRAN software side itself, there are companies like Mavenir, Altiostar, Parallel Wireless. And then SIs have a key role to play in the OpenRAN ecosystem, and companies like NEC, IBM, Fujitsu, they have come up, and they are taking the responsibility for bringing all the elements together and providing these to operators.
Excellent, thank you. That's a pretty good description of the overall value chain, components and all the way to system integrators, right? So, Daniele, would you like to add anything to sort of Anil's description of that value chain?
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot, Roy. And in particular, we have to say that when we bring the OpenRAN into the arena, we have a lot of new open interface. That means that if you look at the radio nodes, nowadays we have, let me say, the intelligent part, the baseband, and then you have the radio system. The OpenRAN has the ambition to open all the interfaces, so among the DU, the RU, and of course DCU, and you have all the interface open on towards the radio access network intelligent controller. So this means that this openness creates a plethora of different stakeholders and scenarios, and so the value chain is completely new, and you have more focus of different stakeholders over radio, over hardware, over the hardware costs, the softwareization platform like the IaaS and the PaaS, and of course the players that will build the RAN software, and of course the system integration. But an important stuff that I want to emphasize is the fact that ORAN brings into the arena a complete new paradigm related to the cloud. And the cloud is the common baseline of all these initiatives. So if from one side it seems that you have a completely new ecosystem with a lot of players, but you have to consider that the cloud will bring into the arena the possibility to catalyze all these activities under the cloud paradigm. And so this platform will interoperate, and we feel that this will create a completely new open industrial chain of RAN builders. And of course, the telco application will be developed from different stakeholders, focusing on each single radio, single area, thanks to the cloud. And this will boost all the innovation, and will be able to create a faster and faster innovation loop. The important stuff is that when you speak of ORAN, it's like when from the TV, you pass from broadcasting TV to the smart TV. And when you go from the ORAN, you go from the RAN to the ORAN. That is a smart appliance in which you create an ecosystem of app developers that in principle could create a complete new arena. And for this reason, of course, you have much more complexity, you have much more stakeholders, but a lot of opportunities there. And which are the most important platform requirements? The openness among the interfaces definitely is one key aspect, real openness, and in particular towards the RAN intelligent controller, because it's the real smart part that makes the ORAN programmable in a software way.
Thanks, Daniele, and thanks for expanding on Anil's description of the sort of the new value chain, adding the cloud component and the hyperscalers to that. So let's take a look. So the value chain's expanded. You have new interfaces, new opportunities for software developers to come in. The hyperscaler clouds can come in. We have SIs. So the sort of simplified value chain of the past, where we have a network equipment provider or a NAP, selling to a carrier. That's now broken up into more places where people can add value. Now, let me ask, I know Oguz, early on when you described, sort of standards organizations and all that, you used the phrase, are there too many cooks in this kitchen? Let's expand that kitchen to include not just the open standards and open source initiatives, but beyond that entire value chain. Are there too many cooks in the overall large OpenRAN kitchen? Oguz, would you like to address that, or maybe give us your thoughts?
Very succinctly, not at all. OpenRAN is all about disaggregation and open interfaces, right? So this naturally lends itself to personalization towards optimized solutions for specific network and customer needs. And the OpenRAN network, as a consequence, will potentially be multi-vendor. it will potentially include open source and proprietary components. As we already discussed, it will definitely be cloud-centric, and it will definitely be highly programmable. And with OpenRAN, we're effectively moving towards a software-centric approach to mobile networks. And when you have this many dimensions of flexibility and this many layers in the stack, you will naturally have a lot of companies, organizations contributing to this common goal. And as part of ONF, of course, I am representing the open source community in this panel. And I mentioned in my talk about 10 minutes ago, there are, even in the open source community, there are multiple open source communities in OpenRAN. But to a large extent, we are functioning in a collaborative and complementary fashion. So sort of almost like a big open source community, but not necessarily towards just open source, but an open interface and a vertical stack enabling that. And so at a high level, the software-centric approach I just mentioned is lending itself towards what I can call a software-driven standards model. This is basically an innovate, realize, iterate, and specify cycle. And this is going to take place at all layers of that stack. And from an ONF and other open source community perspective, like ORAN OSC, I think we're both doing a great job in empowering this cycle, this new cycle of standardization in OpenRAN.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I have to say I'm impressed by the fact, ORAN Alliance, ONF, the Linux Foundation, TIP, the Open Infra Foundation. I mean, there's a lot of parties in this, right? And coming together. And what's been actually quite impressive is how they all collaborate and find places where they fit and collaborate in places where there is overlap. So I think that part has been quite different from some other open source initiatives in the past. So I think that's very positive. And there's definitely innovation in software. At the same time, I think we're seeing a lot of innovation even in the silicon itself, all the way down, and optical technology. So what do we see as sort of the maturity of OpenRAN? Where are things today? And I'm going to turn it over to Anil. The other thing is, I know that some of the panelists came with slides. So if you want us to show a specific slide, let us know. And Milad will try to put it up. He's having a little bit of computer problems right now, but we'll attempt to do that. So Anil, what's the maturity of OpenRAN? And then I'll bring in the other panelists as we get started on this topic. Is it realizable today? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, OpenRAN is there today. Actually, it is deployed, and there are multiple deployments in progress in different parts of the world, in Asia, North America, Europe. As of today, as I think most of us are aware, right, Rakuten has done one of the largest OpenRAN deployments, which is supporting both 4G as well as 5G. And this deployment is, it's completely virtualized RAN architecture, which is supporting regular 44R radios, massive MIMO radios, and small cells. And this has really helped them achieve very high. I mean, the network is operating at very high availability. Those numbers are publicly available. So to summarize, I would say that OpenRAN is mature, and it is available for operators to deploy at large scale.
So thanks, Anil. Anand, agree or disagree? OpenRAN is deployable, it's mature, it's ready for prime time.
Yeah, good. Anil spoke before me. Yes, since I told you my background, yes, I've seen it working as well. And yep. Maybe I just add a bit more to it. People should not forget that we are talking any new technology, even if you're talking about a 5G base station today, just a block of it without this openness aspect. Yeah, initially faces some issues, develops and start working. Any operations, any mobile network you're talking about, anywhere in history and in future also. And when it comes to OpenRAN, specifications, some of the things in ORAN and stuff are being developed, But what you have today, based on that, systems are out there. And if you look at the cloud side, the cloud has sufficient maturity, guys. Don't forget that it has been there. If you look at the 3GPP side, there is sufficient maturity as well. Yeah, and then we have a couple of people here who have the products ready and running as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's all I
actually,
have to add.
speaking of a couple other people, actually, I'm going to turn it over to someone who hasn't spoken yet, Alex. Alex, so what, maybe share with us what innovation you see from, maybe silicon to radios to transport to sort of the cloud computing platforms, right? Alex, you want to share with us what you see on that value chain and maturity and what's happening?
Yeah, from our side, thanks for the question. From our side, in the last months, we have been working at Telefónica in collaboration with selected partners in the hardware design for the main OpenRAN technology elements in order to build a complete portfolio of radio units and baseband equipment that could be capable of a full 4G and 5G RAN rollout in our main markets. Okay, so what we have realized is that, for example, for DU, some components as the CPU should be powerful enough to support dense and complex urban 4G 5G nodes with enough headroom also for software evolutions. And to provide, for example, the DU the best capacity and processing power, we have employed third generation scalable processors in order to benefit from the last improvement in terms of memory, storage, and also network technologies. On the other hand, we have also selected some ASIC-based acceleration cards, Intel-based acceleration cards to assist the baseband workload processing. And we have implemented also some network cards, NIC, handling the Cpr interface toward the radio units, but with the main characteristic that it has time sim capabilities that can be used for both from hold and mid hold interfaces. What we want with this is to avoid the use of front hold switches, what we at least believe that could be potential points of failures in the future. As we have also evaluated essential components as random access memory cards, flash memory cards, hard disk device, and everything, because with OpenRAN give us as operator the power to control which components we are going to include in our solutions. So, for instance, regarding the RU, the radio unit, we have done similar analysis, defining the reference architecture, selecting the right components in terms of FPGAs, power amplifier, LNA, filter elements, and all of these kind of components. One of the main challenge is to support in terms of RUs all the widest possibilities in terms of bandwidth and carrier configurations to meet all the band requirements that we have in all the markets. So this is something that we have been taking care, trying to cover all the possibilities in all our markets. Of course, all this analysis that we have done could be applied for example, for the DU located physically at the site, but all these considerations are also equally valid when we use the DU in a centralized and cloudified version.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it depends on the architecture. Now, you talk a little bit about the RU and innovations there you're seeing on the RU. So on the RU side, on the antenna side, on the radio side, there's this question about massive MIMO and Open RAN, right? So some say incumbents are saying, well, look, we have much more innovation around massive MIMO, which is necessary to get sort of 5G deployed, and Open RAN's very far behind. Anil, any thoughts on adding to that what Alex just said and maybe addressing the massive MIMO question?
I think again, the fact that yes, this kind of statements have been made in media by the current or vendors, RAN vendors. But as I said at the beginning, we have already deployed Massive MIMO in Japan, and this deployment has been done with a panel, Massive MIMO panel from NEC. It's a 32T, 32R panel, and these sites are commercial on air, and it is based on ORAN front haul specifications.
Yep, well, got it. 32T, 32R, and then maybe 64 soon, right? Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah. Right, excellent. Well, let's move on to the RIC. I know we brought it up, and everyone sort of talked about the RIC. And I'm going to turn it back to Alex, and then have Oguz jump in here, because I know he's the RIC is one of Oguz's passions. That I've known. It's in the time I've known him. So Alex, comments about the role of the RIC, both near real-time and non-real-time, both NRT. That's kind of unfortunate naming, but it is what it is. So your comments on the RIC. Is it ready, mature? What do you think?
Yeah, but I mean, RIC will enable not only RAN vendors, but also operators and third parties to deploy innovative services as RAN applications that can leverage emerging AI ML-based technologies through open standardized APIs in a cloud-based environment. So that will provide a greater control on the RAN from operators, enabling policy settings to tune the neighbor better. As you have mentioned, the RIC has two flavors. Yep. The non-real-time RIC that include all the radio resource management services and policy management, also run analytics and provide AI ML models to the near real-time RIC, which is the other flavor that has been included in the OpenRAN Alliance specifications. In that case, the near real-time RIC, we can say that this is a platform that can host a third-party application that OpenRAN Alliance has called X apps, working in a cloud-based environment, close to the RAN network and performing closed-loop actions toward the CUDU elements. One of the enablers that RIC have is the use cases that it can bring. No, for instance, we have a basic use case like traffic steering, massive MIMO beamforming, two more advanced use cases that could be V2X and RAN slicing, and also aerial vehicles radio resource allocation.
Yep. No, I think that makes sense. So maybe just one last question to you. Is it mature, ready for prime time, before I turn it over to Oguz?
Yeah, I mean, from our side, we have done some lab tests with the RIC. For the first pilots and deployments, we will not use the RIC solution, but we believe that as soon as a RIC mature a little bit more, we are going to include in our architecture.
Got it. Thanks, Alex. So it's coming. It's near mature. How's that? So Oguz, tell us about what are your thoughts? RIC, near real time, non-real time, and the XApps marketplace that we're all going to benefit from eventually.
Sure. So as you all know, ONF has its roots in SDN, right? So it was really natural for us to embark on the journey of developing the microservices-based, fully cloud-native, highly available, and scalable near real-time RIC platform. And it is built on our production-grade SDN controller, ONOS. So now, I don't know if everybody knows what ONOS stands for. It is Open Networking Operating System. So I would like to underline the operating system phrase there. So effectively, one can view, now that we're talking a software-centric approach, the near real-time RIC is the RAN operating system, effectively. And embracing this software-centric and cloud-based approach, at ONF, we have been promoting an SDK-based approach to such an interface between a RIC and the RAN applications, the XApps. Taking in cues from how the application landscape has blown up thanks to such an approach in the mobile handset side, we believe an SDK-based solution will help open up this side of the business further into maybe a wide spectrum of stakeholders, giving us truly innovative control applications, which in turn will help operators personalize their network operations according to their own business models, supported use cases, and regional customer trends on a common platform. So, but then there is a second dimension to this important interface. As more and more aspects of the ORAN architecture gets deployed around the globe, it is certain that multiple RIC implementations will find their place in the network. Then from an XApp developer perspective, the ideal interface needs to enable portability of their application across all RIC platforms so that they have as wide a market reach as possible. So for this purpose, the two open source consortia, ONF and ORAN OSC, are now developing what we call a Portability Sdk to do exactly this.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to get here is, once we have this SDK-based interface between the RIC, which is the RAN operating system, and the XApps, then we are going to be opening up this whole RAN ecosystem, which has been very, very closed for decades, to really blow up in terms of XApp development. And so as a consequence, while developing the RIC platform, one needs to be very application driven. So this means at times being ahead of the specifications in developing new service models to support these innovative XApps. And so this takes me back to the earlier statement about the software-driven standards, the model of innovate, realize, iterate, and specify. And I think definitely things are falling into place. And you asked about the maturity. You know, very recently we heard from Nokia about their service enablement platform that they productized, which has their production grade RIC in it. And from an ONF perspective, at the end of the year, we are going to have a production grade open source near real-time RIC available for consumption.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. I'm going to start writing my XApp now to that portable API. Excellent. Very good. Well, what we're going to do right now is we're near the end of the first part, section A. But before we do that, I would like to see if Stefano can maybe provide his perspectives on sort of what the platform requirements are for OpenRAN, and maybe which components you believe to be sort of furthest along. And then after Stefano, if we could have maybe Andy speak on the same topic, and then we'll wrap up this section and move on to the next one. So Stefano first, and then Andy, if you will.
Roy, thanks. I think it's a lot of the things that's been said and analyzed. So I will just say that, of course, some of the opening of the interfaces and so on will take a bit of time, and I'm referring specifically maybe to some specific, like some CU, DUs. It's all a matter of deployment. You have to deploy more. So as everything, once you start to deploy, I remember my old days, a interface was like a difficult interface to achieve. Everything is relative to the time and the deployment schedules. But what I wanted to say, which is I think is the most important, is that all this enables the first most important principle, which is the separation of hardware and software. I think that's the most important component, and I do believe that separation today is there. Now, in terms of further, the component which will take a bit more time, we have heard about Massive MIMO from Anil, and we have very much aligned with that. We we understand that more things can be done in that space, but on the other side, it's coming. There is no reason why some of the processing capabilities will not be able to meet that. As I said, we need to remember 10 years ago, I do remember we have talked about software radio back in 2000 in Vodafone, and it's just a matter of perspective. So, and the other things that is important is the requirement, as you said, in terms of OpenRAN. It's very important as emerged how the platforms, in terms of the virtualization or containerization platform, needs to make sure that the footprint is as reduced as possible, because when we are trying to look at deploying OpenRAN in a different way, not just necessarily as a single RAN it was in the past, we're trying to look as well at densifying sites, and as such, we're trying to minimize the amount of equipment at the cell sites and try to concentrate some of the processing in kind of aggregation point for processing and so on. So it's particularly important that any of the platforms that are behind, like the containerized platforms or virtualization platform, they need to really minimize the amount of requirements and footprint in order to be able to be effective in that space. That's really what I would say overall, in terms of your question.
Yep, low footprint, low overhead. I think we're going to need that. And obviously now we have a time-sensitive component, right, to OpenRAN that maybe isn't there in the sort of the regular cloud platform. Very, if you have a SaaS service, maybe not so critical to be real time. It's just got to be fast. But in this case, it's a little different. So, Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you to have the last word and wrap up this section for us, please, if you will. Any thoughts?
Sure, thank you. I think that one of the key messages here in terms of platform requirements is that any OpenRAN platform is, as ever, only as good as the sum of its parts. And as we start to assemble our first commercial implementations, we find that some areas are stronger than others, and that's an area that we need to work on. And I think it wasn't mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about the key ecosystem players, but it isn't just really the vendors here, it's also the responsibility and the roles that the operators need to play. And it's important that all operators, as far as is practically possible, we move in the same direction. So we're defining common requirements. If we bombard the vendors with multiple different configurations, multiple different products, we're never going to hit the economies of scale that we need to see. So, it's very encouraging to see, strong participation in webinars such as this one from a number of key global operators, and we have very good relationships for OpenRAN and moving forwards and working collaboratively with vendors and operators alike. The platform requirements as well come down to, a lot of excellent work that's done within ORAN. I think that's critical, and certainly our experience as we get closer to our first commercial implementations, the necessity of having strong specifications and clear architectures is critical as we bring what is fundamentally a disaggregated platform together. And I think that the ideals of some aspects of OpenRAN from the early days of the idea of a true plug and play type network, the reality is still some way from that. So there's some work that we have to do there in terms of improving the interface specification, and that will enable us to simplify testing and integration activities, two things that have huge operational cost associated with them. And it's important that I think that we work very hard now in hardening these platforms, and that's an area that certainly requires some focus. I'd like to see, I think, more work done in terms of those platform requirements and their alignment. As I say, ORAN's a key component in this, but as is other industry forums such as ONF and also the Telecom Infra project, which we've worked with for a number of years now, and is a strong platform to help us in the commercialization of products and have them ready for operator implementations.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Andy, for the perspective, and very valuable. I mean, made many good points to close out this section. So very good. We're going to move on to the second section. We talk about OpenRAN deployment. So we've talked a little bit about maturity, platforms. We're going to talk about deployments. And I'm going to speak just briefly into the topics we're going to be covering in the next sort of 15-20 minutes here. And then I'm going to ask Milad to switch us to the panel view, as I said, so you can see their faces, the panelists' faces in a little bit more detail. But before I have Milad switch us over, what we're going to be talking about in this the second section, is deployment. So talk about large-scale deployments and timing. Now we've already heard, in the first part about obviously Rakuten, which is an example that people always bring up, and some of our panelists here have been sort of very well associated with that carrier / e-commerce company. But we're also going to be talking about something we haven't talked about yet, which is private enterprise mobile networks. So private networks, private cellular networks, whatever the name is the use of cellular technology within an enterprise context for a private network, not a public mobile network. You heard, Andy and Stefano talk about sort of disaggregation and the need for integration, and so we talk about the role of system integrators. And the system integrator doesn't mean that it's just an SI, right, or GSI. The carrier can play a role of a system integrator too, right? That's an. And then we'll touch a bit about CapEx and OpEx impact. I know it's still early, but perhaps the panelists can share with us some of the impact they've seen. And we'll talk about, why OpenRAN is the greatest thing since sliced bread, which is the OpenRAN benefits. So we're going to move on to this section. And if we could get the view switch, I don't know if that's possible, so we could see the panel. Excellent. Now I can see everyone's faces in high fidelity. Very good. I like that 4K camera. No, just kidding. You look really good. Not that you don't look good normally when I see you, but
oh, thank you.
Very good. All right, let's move on to the second section. All right, we'll go. In this case, we'll actually start off with Alex, and the question to you first Alex, then Anil, then Daniele, is where do we expect large-scale deployment? Where do we expect these large-scale deployments in 2021, this year? Where are we going to see them, Alex? Aside from talking about Rakuten, maybe other examples in the world. There are other carriers in the world too, right? So, like the ones you come from, right?
I can give you some hints at different Telefónica sites. We have established a phased plan for deployment of OpenRAN. We started with our phase 0 in 2020. We have launched 4G and 5G pilots that will run through 2021 in our big 4 markets. That are UK, Germany, Brazil, and Spain. Then we will move to phase 1 for first commercial deployments that we will start after the pilot have finished, being able to extend to the beginning of 2023. We believe that in this phase in particular, we will use the figure of a system integrator in order to be responsible of the end-to-end product. And then for phase 2, that means massive deployment. We expect that at least the 50% of the growth in our radio deployments will be based on OpenRAN by 2025. This is our expectations.
Excellent. Well, that's actually pretty massive in terms of the deployment by 2025, and very, very good. So it is coming, and it's coming really big. So Anil, your perspective on this?
Again, similar perspective. I mean, OpenRAN, we have gone through a phase where OpenRAN deployments have shown, or the technology has shown its maturity. And now we are what I would call in acceleration phase, where we can see multiple operators taking initiative to deploy OpenRAN at scale.
Excellent. And then we're going to go to Daniele, and here we have a special treat for you. Daniele's taken the trouble to actually prepare a slide for this portion of his response. So let's go over to Daniele's excellent slide. I like the color scheme there. Daniele, would you like to add to what Alex and Anil just said?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, which are the, let me say, deployment we expect, and which are the time window for this kind of deployment? If we look at this slide, we have tried to emphasize the plethora of all the possible ORAN deployment scenarios that could be targeted thanks to the openness of the interfaces that the OpenRAN brings into the arena. And this is something that is very important, because if you look at the left part of the slide, of course, there you have the current situation in which you have a block for all the radio. And then if you look at the different possibility, OpenRAN gives the possibility to split the CU and the U. And of course, you have an open fronthaul at RAU level. And then, of course, as Stefano said before, you have the possibility to centralize the DU. And then again, you could interwork with the current RU legacy with the fronthauling gateway. So what we feel is that in 2021, we will see a lot of very important pilot, maybe also pre-commercial one, that will be focused on understanding which are the most important configuration that fits into the needs of the different operators in the different countries. Because of course, this depends very much on the particular evolution path in which each operator, of course, is in a particular moment. But this is a very important stuff. So we will feel that in 2021, we will have important pilot, and then we will have 2022, and then even more 2023 as important years in which we will go towards important years for commercial volumes and so on and so forth. Yep. Of course, yeah.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, of course, it's quite important to understand that ORAN is not a big bang, but is a path that is already started. As it was said before by Anil, of course, we have already examples and real cases in which we are working with the OpenRAN on the field. But when we bring into the new performance that are quite important for many operators, like TIM, that is, for instance, the multi-use MIMO, the beamforming, the artificial intelligence and machine learning applied to 3.7 GHz bandwidth. This is something that, of course, 2021 will be the year to test, to understand. And then, of course, we will have the next year to have the exploitation of what we developed during these years. Very important under the stuff of, let me say, centralization of the DU, because this is the first exploitation of the software and hardware disaggregation Stefano mentioned before. And we feel that there it's quite important to see the pilot to reach the maturity of this hardware in order to be comparable and competitive with the ASIC on which radio baseband units are based nowadays. And of course, as Alex stated before, we need a good progress there for processing power in order to be able to be competitive from the point of view of the processing and also of the energy consumption. But we feel that this is really an important stuff and path that is already started. And another point that I want to stress is that as far as we will go very fast with the ORAN, this means that we will be able to support a full cloudification of the telco network up to the edge. I want to stress this point because, of course, when we speak of real deployments, at the end, you are saying that you have a completely end-to-end network that is fully telco-based and fully cloud-native based. And this means that you need to control your network from the core network perspective, from the central part up to the edge. And to the edge, you will have also the possibility to instantiate the OpenRAN. And in this sense, it's quite important for operator 2021 to understand which is the best configuration, if the DDU on the cell sites, if the DDU at centralized sites, as a function of the technology maturity that we will see. And of course, the path towards ORAN will be a trade-off in order to catch the opportunity of the maturity of the technologies as a function of the different time windows.
Okay. Thanks, Daniele. Thank you for the perspective, the operator perspective, from Telecom Italia and what you see there. I'm going to move along here. So what we're going to do next is for this section, cover a couple of things, and a heads up to the panelists. I'm going to actually turn it over to Oguz first to talk about. So we've talked about OpenRAN and the use in sort of public networks. Oguz, maybe share with us your thoughts on private network deployment, right? We talked about sort of private cellular networks, and then from there, I'm going to take it over to Stefano. If you could talk about the system integration role, right? What's important in system integration, and can the telco play the role of system integrator? So maybe Stefano and Anand, you could think about that as we get Oguz's view on private networks, and other people feel free to jump in as well. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit to make sure we cover all the key topics here. But Oguz, private networks, and then Stefano and maybe Anand and maybe Anil talk about integration, telco role in system integration. So Oguz, go ahead.
Great. So at ONF, one of the projects that I oversee is Ether, which is an open source platform that enables private connected 5G edge cloud service to enterprises as a managed service. And actually, Ether includes SD-RAN under its umbrella. And one thing to note is that Ether is operational as a pilot network for over a year now around the globe. With multiple nines availability. So looking at it from that angle, private enterprise mobile networks are definitely a greenfield opportunity. And as such, OpenRAN has the promise of enabling flexibility and use case specific configurability at attractive price points. So I believe small cells and private networks are perhaps the most suitable short-term application for OpenRAN. And thanks to their 5G spectrum allocation policies, there are already a few developments in Germany that support this. We have a number of enterprises deploying OpenRAN actually, from vendors such as Airspan, Mavenir, and of course Nokia. But one thing to note is at the end of the day, enterprises will be looking for a complete solution for their use case. And OpenRAN is only one part of such a solution. So integrating it with a private mobile core, with a local breakout, and an enterprise edge where Industry 4.0 supporting IoT platforms and automation solutions and apps that are based on them reside, along with the platforms that enable hybrid and multi-cloud connectivity is key. So you need the whole package.
No, agreed, and thank you, and yeah, having OpenRAN running in private networks is a way to get quick innovation. Deployment scale is slightly smaller. In terms of making decisions, enterprises can make a decision very quickly around these things, and the blast radius, should something go wrong, not that it would. If my accept fails, for instance, then the blast radius is limited to the enterprise as opposed to taking out, sort of the Pacific Northwest, right? So very good. Excellent. All right, let's move on to talking about system integration in OpenRAN and maybe the role of the telco in that as well. So Stefano, if you could maybe kick off the answer to that, and then I'll go to Anand next, and Anil, if you have something to add, let's go ahead. Oh, Stefano, you're muted, so.
Of course. Yeah, I'll try to kick it quickly. I just want to say, as a tail of what Oguz said and you said, it doesn't have to fail. I mean, it's not the OpenRAN. No. I know what you said. No, I know what you said. I just want to say that the real thing is that the enterprise require agility. Okay, which is something that operators have been looking for, and to some extent in our industry for telco, we have been a bit beaten up by the over-the-top players and the big hyperscaler. But it's time now to wipe that out, because I think operator can be agile, and I think this is the key things, right? So I close this bit, and I just wanted to, the system integrator work is something that was happening even before in the traditional RAN. Okay. Now, what we are saying here is because there is disaggregation, some operator has started to say, maybe I need someone else to help me with putting everything back together. And some other people have been so used to do it in the IT environment that they have proposed themselves in that space and says, we can help you do that. So from our point of view, it's just a choice. I do believe that some operators, I personally believe, coming from that industry, the operator needs to gear up. I think we heard before Andy, and I'm very much in agreement with him. I think integration of all the parts needs to really be part of an operator's skills. Also, because at the end they need to understand what they are managing, right? So that's an important component. So there is no doubt about it. But there is also the opportunity, for example, for some enterprises. We go back to the concept of the enterprises we just announced before. We have seen the most of the deployment in the enterprise space that works out with integrators, or telco integrators. We have seen example in Germany, in the US, and other places. Because some of the enterprise are not really skills in the telco space. So they do need someone who help them to do that. Absolutely. Who are these system integrator? They can be IT big companies, as we are used to see, or they can be some smaller company. Like, for example, as a Mavenir, we also act as an integrator. It's not really our long-term model, in the sense that our long-term model is to sell software with licenses, but the reality is today, in order to boost the ecosystem, is needed. So there are different things. So system integrator can be as simple or complex as you desire in your model, but definitely, I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I see the operators taking a strong role in that space, because at the end is building their network. And remember, Roy, that a lot of the interworking, like between CU, DU software and RU, will happen anyhow in certification labs with the software vendors and the hardware vendors. Because those will have to work anyhow according to ORAN.
No, that's fair. That's very fair, right? I mean, it's like, if you're loading Linux on a Dell server, you don't actually worry that it's not going to work at that point in time, right? And we can
at a certain point in time. At a certain point in time, yes.
Agreed.
So that's what I think, and I know that Andy has a strong opinion on that. So if I still have 1 minute, I'll definitely pass it over to Andrew, because
let's have Andy talk, and then Anand and Anil. Then Andy, he's named you, he's championed you. What are your thoughts, Andy?
No, I mean, I think we can't underestimate how critical the system integration piece is as we move forward to these commercial deployments. And it's not, it's something that takes time. Typical integration of even any two components for two vendors that haven't previously interworked can take 2 to 3 months. Sometimes it could be quicker, but that's a typical reference. Now, in an OpenRAN platform, if you were bringing together 4 or 5 new vendors, you spend time in preparing the high-level design, the low-level design, and then you actually get the stuff into the lab. And this is an area that, certainly when we're working across, our operator group and also many of our partner networks, they're all looking to realize the benefits that OpenRAN brings, the broader ecosystem, the resilience of that ecosystem, faster time to market, hopefully, and a broader reach of innovation. They're still looking to harness all of that, but also with almost an off-the-shelf solution. So we need, as an industry, to look at how we make these platforms more readily accessible to operators. When you have operators of the scale on this call, I think that we can undertake many of these actions ourselves, and we're fortunate that many of the vendors are prepared to work with us because of our size. But there are many operators around the globe that don't have that advantage. Right. And we need to help them. And by that more collaborative working, we can really ensure that OpenRAN can be a full global success. And that's something that, I hope as an industry we can look to address in the coming months.
Agreed. Well, thank you for those perspectives and for championing the tier 2, tier 3s and tier 4, 5s, which don't exist. But yes, absolutely. Yeah, they're going to need that too. Everyone Anand, any thoughts on that? First you, and then Anil, and then we'll actually wrap up this section and move on to the next to keep on time.
Quickly. I mean, I agree with what's said until now. You can anyone can become system integrator, and there are many different roles out there, as we have already heard about the hardware side, the virtualization side, and as was put about a smaller operator, they might also look for public cloud as well. Yeah. And then after that, the application side and the operator. I think maybe keeping it short to match with time as well is that the operators have to gear up and take things in their hands. And they also have to remember that, they have a lot of good IT side as well. That knowledge and skills can also be utilized. Yeah, I'll stop at that.
Yep, excellent. Anil, just to close out this.
I think what I would like to say is I completely agree with Andy on the need for a collaborative approach. So the industry, both, I'm saying OpenRAN vendors and operators, especially the tier 1 operators, they need to work in a collaborative manner, and that will help in finally developing these blueprints. And those blueprints are the ones that can be then deployed easily by tier 2, tier 3 operators.
Yeah, Roy, if I can echo
go ahead and then
comment.
Yes.
Yeah, because I feel that this is a very key point, because as an operator, we feel that we should have a cooperative approach just to define the platform that should be used for a full end-to-end automation. And so the path that we have to use there. And so I agree with Andy. And I do feel that we should be able as operator to take a role there in order to contribute in that direction. And if we take the private network, we feel that this could be really a good starting point to have this maturity of solution, because there you need an end-to-end automation in order to connect to the core network, the cloud, up to the edge with a local breakout, being able to go towards an OpenRAN. And there we could also train which are the use cases in order to open the OpenRAN and to bring new use cases and application, hearing the needs of the industry that require a lot of flexibility. So I do feel that this is one of the key aspects for which OpenRAN could enable really a strong boost, not only for the radio, but for the entire programmability of
the whole ecosystem. Yep, agreed. No, very good. And thank you for those thoughts, Daniele, to close us out. All right, let's put up the next slide. We're going to go to the third section here. This one should be fun, and we'll knock these things out, right? So, common myths and misconceptions about OpenRAN. Now, we've addressed some of these things, but maybe one of the panelists may have a more interesting and exciting answer as we go through that. Let's start with the one that's been out there, put out by some very large incumbents in terms of OpenRAN is not secure. Now, if you had been on this earlier, you would have seen Anand talking about OpenRAN, security OpenRAN. So maybe we could put up a couple of Anand slides first and then have Anand start. And I know Anil and Daniele, you all also indicated that you had things to share on that. But we're going to go through all these misconceptions quickly and then get to the next section so we can get to actual Q&A. But Anand, let's kick us off. OpenRAN is actually not secure. It's not as secure.
Sure. We can, I guess my slide, the following slide is my slide, so we can go there.
And Milad, if we could, next slide.
While that's done, I can speak. So look, certainly nothing is secure until you make it secure. Yeah? you leave your house door open and windows open, and now you're talking about not only security but also about safety. Yep. You have to provision security. As soon as this OpenRAN thing was started quite some time back in 3GPP, you knew about that, and security was there from the very beginning. Don't forget that. Issues. Let's talk about the issues first, and then I'll talk about solutions. The new interfaces, the new endpoints, more open source, multiple different parties working together in one cloud space. Yeah. And therefore this is trust chaining issue that I write there. It's not that simple. And the physical security issues. Yeah. And if you go on to the next slide, so keep things within time, otherwise I'll end up speaking for 2 hours or something. Look at the security part. go back at different levels. Look at the 3GPP specifications part. Yeah, physical security. You have at the CU part, DU part, but if you look at the RRC and user plane security, that's the access stratum. It's going deeper in the network. It's actually far better than what was there before. Yeah, the base station was there that could be hacked, and you have the credentials there. And physical security part, what happens? You provide that, but at the same time, you have these credentials that keep on changing very fast. Yeah, so you have much better security, guys. That's one point that I'm saying. The other point is that you have the possibility of separating two types of security. Yeah, one is the IT part and the standard security part. That's identity access management, your privilege access management, your hardening part that was also said earlier by someone, and all these aspects and vulnerability assessment. You can separate this, make it ready already in the network. Then you're only taking care of the new things that are coming in the network. Yeah, and that's the different vendors coming in and the security for that. I can get into how to detail that, but maybe keeping it for the time being to this point. Other aspect that comes in, which is beautiful as well, is that because you're working in such kind of space where you're clarifying things, anyone you can ask here, they don't know all the assets. Getting to this arena, you can know all your assets as well.
Yeah.
You can go through your pipeline in such a way that you can keep the right logging, so you can visualize them and also see who is accessing what at which time. I'll keep it to that point. I think everyone can say there is no security, but there are solutions out there, and you can have standard solutions that are being used today also to take care of the interfaces and stuff.
Right.
I'll stop at that. Thank you.
No, I agree with you. I mean, as we go into sort of CI/CD, sort of cloud platform, cloud pipeline, the cloud providers, there are security processes, and as you pointed out in the earlier talk, they're available, right? As part of your CI/CD, as part of your deployment, you can secure all the processes and all the elements just as other people do. So it's no worse, no better, no worse than any sort of cloud solutions or platforms. So, Anil, any thoughts on that?
I think yes, what Anand has said, I just want to supplement that. I would say the current security approach is, based on closed proprietary boxes. So maybe I'll call it, security through obscurity, right?
Yep. Yes.
With open interfaces, you have observability now.
Yep.
And if there are any issues, I mean, there are going to be issues, but those issues can be then resolved in a collaborative manner. Having said that, I would also say that ORAN has done a great job, and the teams are still working to the interfaces, secure interfaces have been defined, and wherever interfaces are not secured, the teams are working in ORAN. There's a security task group there. They are focusing on that aspect. And the last comment, what I think Anand also referred, that OpenRAN system, generally they are making use of virtualization, and there all these companies who have years of security experience behind them, they are providing these platforms. Yeah. So again, I mean that again brings security. And last point is the physical security aspect. So with virtualization now, the CU/DUs potentially can be hosted in the data centers, and that's what we have done, in fact, in some of the deployments. Yep. And that again means that CU/DUs are in a secure environment, and that basically results in keying material being secure.
Yep. No, it sounds good. I know I got to go hack eCpr now is what I need to do. Based on what you just said, right? That I'm going to go after eCpr is where I'm going to go as a hacker. Okay, moving right along. I'm going to take the rest of it relatively quickly so we can get to the road ahead. So I may skip a couple that just so you know, panelists, don't be surprised if I skip a couple just so we can make it a bit of time. We can get to OpenRAN. So this one is, I think it's pretty cool. I'm going to ask a chief marketing officer about OpenRAN will become just a confusing marketing term because it's not well defined. Stefano, what's your thoughts? Misconception?
I think some people are already using it in a confusing way. So, there will be always people that make confusion of something that is pretty clear. OpenRAN just means open. That's it. There's no other connotation. And anything that is not open is just simply not OpenRAN. But to be specific, I think I think the question is very simple, as we said. OpenRAN represents the disaggregation of hardware and software. And on top of that, it represents as well the ability to separate a component, which is the RRU, towards some of the other software components, which is in the BBU, and specifically the BBU to be decomposed in CU and DU. So that's very simple. Anyone who's trying to get around this is just simply trying to confuse the water and put mud in the water. So that's very simple. I just think that today has been reused very strongly. Of course, there have been some political connotation as well. I've heard already some people starting to making a political point. I think it's technology. I think, and by the way, many people says OpenRAN by itself is not technology. It's just an open interface. What it becomes technology is when what we normally consider, where all the people talks about OpenRAN, talks about a virtualized implementation of RAN. So if we say OpenRAN by itself, doesn't have to necessarily be virtualized, just needs to be an open interfaces. When you talk more specifically today, we're talking about OpenRAN plus virtualized, which is really the disaggregation of hardware and software with all the benefit that we have been talking about. So let's keep on talking about that, and anyone can try to make it confusing, but we'll go back to this concept and we'll keep it as the reference point, as a lighthouse for RAN.
Yep,
yes, exactly.
we'll stick to the standard, right? ORAN Alliance, TIP, ONF, right? All your favorite acronyms, right? We're going to stick to that. All right. While I have you, can you address one other misconception, myth, or maybe truth, which is all OpenRAN really is, relating to the previous point, is it's a way for the telcos to get a discount coupon against the incumbent RAN vendors. True, false, yes, no?
So some people have used it in their way. Some procurement have been going after that, which is fine. I think I would just comment it this way. If someone is looking at doing that, they are just short-sighted, because what OpenRAN means is a much larger view. It's the same as some people have been just putting some software on a server, and they think they have virtualized their infrastructure. You're far away from having virtualized your infrastructure, just putting software on a COTS server. What really virtualized means, what OpenRAN brings, and I think there were some questions about the benefits and so on, which is the real advantage. It's not just some discount only. It's an overall network economics, is a structure cost, which doesn't involve only CapEx, is OpEx, is about distribution, is a new way of deployment and so on. And that really leads to the ultimate benefit in virtualization, which is the disruptive technology in our decade, which is automation. I wanted to stress that you can bring anything you want in your network, but until that network is capable of being fully automated, you have not done anything in your infrastructure. Now, we have to take steps, because it won't be available from day one, everything, but the ultimate goal for all of us needs to automate our infrastructure in order to completely get all the benefits of this disruption that we are doing with open interfaces and virtualization.
Okay, that's fair. All right, very good. Anil, I'm going to pick on you next, and I'm actually going to ask you to address an item from earlier as well, which is, so I'm going to make a statement. OpenRAN is not as power efficient because of all those pieces that come in, number one. And number two is OpenRAN doesn't really improve CapEx and OpEx, because what you save in CapEx, you have, the complexity more than makes up for it in OpEx. So Anil, maybe the power part first, and then the CapEx OpEx right after.
Okay. So I think what I would say is that, in our opinion, traditional RAN is really power efficient, and the reason I would say is because you have to really over-engineer the baseband units, and you have to over-dimension them so that each site is able to support the maximum target capacity. And on the other hand, with OpenRAN, right, you get the scalability, and you can have demand-based usage of the processors. So as a result of that, OpenRAN effectively results in better energy efficiency Also with OpenRAN, with virtualization, it is possible that during off-peak hours, you are able to consolidate the workloads on fewer machines, and then the remaining machines can be utilized for any other workloads, or those can be turned off and so on. Mm-hmm. The other aspect on the radio side, I would say that again, the major part of energy consumption in the network comes from the ORU or the radio, and the ORUs which are available today, their power consumption is comparable to the radio units which are available from the traditional vendors.
Fair. What about the CapEx OpEx thing? What do you save in CapEx? The complexity you pay in OpEx. True, false?
In fact, again, other way around, right? First of all, yes, on CapEx you have savings, and even on OpEx, we have done TCO modeling with different operators, and OpenRAN actually brings significant OpEx savings, as Stefano mentioned, right? With the OpenRAN and virtualization, the next thing that happens is that you are able to now implement closed loop automation. And with that closed loop automation, operators are realizing and would realize significant OpEx savings. So that's, in fact, in my view, that is one of the main benefits of going towards OpenRAN with virtualization.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Thank you, Anil. And I'm going to close off this section, and I'm going to pick on Andy, just because Stefano nominated you earlier, so it's his fault, really. Andy, telcos are not ready to adopt cloud infrastructure that's necessary, for OpenRAN, much less, take on the whole CI/CD culture. True, false, maybe. Oops, sorry, you muted, Andy.
Well, I think it's part of the journey that we all take in the implementation of OpenRAN. We're building and adapting our platforms to support this. It is just part of the evolution. So, is every operator in the world ready to make that transition? Probably not. Are the leading operators pushing OpenRAN today ready to do it, prepared to do it? Yeah, I think that's the transition that we start to see. So, yeah, I don't think it's any reason to hold anybody back. It's a transition we've made in other areas of our business. RAN is perhaps, it's the last bastion of proprietary implementations, and that's something that we're driving here through this webinar, Ready to Change.
Yep. Well, speaking of basically, charging that RAN castle and taking it over, so it becomes sort of the people's castle. We're going to move on to the next section, which is the road ahead, right? So how do we break down these walls, as it were? And what we're going to do is put up the slide first to talk about what we're going to talk about in that section. We're going to run it about 20 minutes, and then we'll leave the 25 minutes for questions. So audience, please keep those Q&A coming, and encourage you to just type those into the Q&A window. Any compelling questions you have, anything on OpenRAN, right? There's a wide breadth of topic here, and it's very rare to get that many operators and sort of leading vendors on one panel, right? So, all right. So we're going to talk about here is sort of drivers and blockers to OpenRAN adoption. We're going to talk about sort of the key telco considerations in terms of what you need to do. We've talked a bit about some of these already, but we're going to try to sort of wrap it up. Talk about strategies to maximize success. And then finally, how do we participate in this whole wonderful ecosystem? So to kick it off, I'm actually going to go first to Alex and then Daniele, and the question here is, what can help propel OpenRAN's maturity and adoption? First Alex, and then over to Daniele.
Yes, I believe that for OpenRAN to work, the whole industry needs to work together. It is necessary to provide spaces for innovation, integration, and certification of the OpenRAN solutions. Without this, all the components and the product creation will be very difficult. From operator perspective, we have to commit to OpenRAN rollouts in order to encourage suppliers to make the required investment in R&D, for example. The collaboration with other operators is really important. We have to provide a safe environment for the suppliers. This is essential. We have also to provide good requirements in order to help them to focus on our priorities for the first deployments. On the other hand, we need support from governments and policymakers. We need funds in order to develop a richer ecosystem of ORAN compliant companies. Okay, R&D projects and test and integration labs for testing and interoperability. It is important to identify the elements with a lack of developed ecosystem, let's say chipsets, radio units, etc., and promote actions to strengthen them. And last but not least, we have to foster the adoption of ORAN from HALD and open interface from RAN incumbents and also from the new entrants.
Excellent, thank you, Alex. And then I'm going to turn it over to Daniele. And so, what could propel it? And actually, Daniele, I'm going to ask you, what could block it, right? I mean, what are the potential blockades to getting ORAN adopted? So, Daniele?
Yeah. I feel that in order to help the OpenRAN to have full maturity and to overcome the possible block, we should be able, as an entire ecosystem, to understand the different aspects that we want to deal with, and to treat in a stepwise approach. So we have to take the big elephant and to put into pieces, and then of course we have to identify the different steps. So here I have put in the slides that if we want to go from the top part of the slides, that is the current situation, the traditional single vendor, and you wanted to go to the complete ecosystem with the open interface, you have to understand that we have 4 main areas that are very important to be dealt with, and you have to make a lot of work there. We have the disaggregation, the functional separation between the interfaces, then we have the openness, then we have the cloud native approach, and then we have the intelligence. We feel that as an ecosystem altogether, operators, vendors, system integrators, and so on and so forth, we should identify a path in order to be able to put into the table this complexity and making a real deployment in a stepwise approach. So from our understanding, first of all, is key the openness between the remote unit and the distributed unit. This is something which it was made already a lot of work during these years, definitely with FDD frequencies and with up to MIMO 4x4. And now the new challenge is to bring this openness also towards TDD and beamforming and massive MIMO. The second step is the intelligence. We feel that we should start with machine learning and artificial intelligence approach built on top of a full cloudified network, having the end-to-end automation as an important target. So we feel that we have to start from no real-time RIC in order to have POC as soon as possible, and then of course in 2022 and 2023 to work towards real-time analytics and full RIC. And of course also the centralization of the distributed unit into COTS hardware fully automated at the edge is another key steps that in 22 and 23 is something that we have to take care. In order to avoid the block, we should help the ecosystem to bring different stakeholders that are very specialized on cloud and on each single pieces in order to cooperate between them, ensuring that we have real open interfaces. And this is a key point. Also, one attendee has made this question in the question and answer part. I feel that this is an important step, and we have all together to build this. And I agree with Alex. We have an important role as operator, and all the fora that are working here. You mentioned, Roy, very well before. All the Open Foundation, the OpenRAN Alliance, and the TIP, and of course the OTIC Labs, the TIP Community Lab, in order to make the end-to-end integration and the end-to-end interoperability built in an open way, with an open innovation, ensuring that the doors are open to all the ecosystem, is something that really could help in making this technology mature in a very fast way and avoiding each block.
Okay. Thank you, Daniele, and thank you again for providing a visual. I think that definitely does help the audience a lot. So, all right, very good. There are sort of two questions I would still like to ask before we wrap up here and go into the Q&A section. So the first one is, given what Daniele just shared and Alex said earlier, first Anil and Stefano, do you have any thoughts about how a telco should think about adopting OpenRAN, right? What are the criteria in terms of looking inside themselves, right? Sort of understanding what are the criteria that they need to understand to make sure that they can actually benefit from OpenRAN. So I'm going to go to Anil first, sort of the telco point of view, right? And then also to Stefano, right? How should telcos think about it? And then just to prep the other panelists in terms of wrapping up, I'd like to do a call to action. I mean, we brought up all these different acronyms of all these different alliances and open source consortiums and the right. So the last one, in terms of wrapping up this section, I'm going to turn it over to Oguz and Andy as a call to arms, right? In terms of how do you participate. So think about that as we go with first Anil and then Stefano. So Anil and Stefano, telcos, how should I think about adopting OpenRAN? How do I make sure that I actually meet the criteria to succeed with OpenRAN? Anil first and then Stefano.
Yeah. So I think what I would say is that, and we briefly talked about it earlier, that it is going to be, when operators decide to deploy OpenRAN, it is going to be a collaborative effort. Both operator and their selected vendors, they really need to work together to make this whole thing successful. So that's the most important point in my view. The second aspect would be that given that, as I said earlier, OpenRAN does involve virtualization of the RAN software. So it will be probably important that the RAN teams are comfortable with cloud technology. So there will be some reskilling required there. And then the third aspect is that because now with open and virtualized RAN based approach, closed loop automation is going to be done more and more. So it will be important that the engineers, they probably have software programming skills. So these are the three aspects I would like to highlight.
Excellent. Thanks, Anil. Stefano, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I support whatever the 3 points of Anil. I would just add that it's key a different mindset. This is a disruptive thing. I like to just throw here to say, I've heard some people saying that, but OpenRAN is not a single RAN. It's not just a replacement of single RAN. It can replace a single RAN, but it's also a new way of deployment. It's a new architecture. It's the ability to deploy with an architecture where you have RU, DU, and CU deployed in different way, which means also it's a different way of building sites. It's a different way to get new sites. It's a different way of building new sites. So I think this is the most, probably the most complex, because beyond all the things we said, I think this type of change, which is think in a different network. We don't want 5G to become another 4G as an extension of an existing 3G network, where you just deploy 5G carriers at the 4G sites, 3G, 2G sites, and so on. And the other bit is in terms of the criteria, I underline and repeat the automation that Anil has said, because this is a key success criteria that they have to search for. CI/CD, so it's not anymore a network that you implement and then you don't touch, because if you touch, it falls over. It's a new methodology where you can touch while the network keep on working properly because you're becoming more agile. And the last comment to me, it has to be virtualized. So the operator needs to think, I want a virtualized infrastructure. And my last quote, which Roy, you have already heard several times, is no virtualization, no 5G network, in my opinion, no real 5G benefits. So from that point of view, I think this is what needs to be in the mind of an operator when they embrace OpenRAN, which is not just OpenRAN, but the whole virtualization, openness, CI/CD, automations, and so on. Excellent.
Thank you, Stefano. And then what we're going to do is now we're going to wrap with a call to action. But actually, I'm going to just warn Anand that I'm going to maybe ask you to speak at the very end. So just, you're not done yet, Anand. One more role for you. Let's go to Oguz and then Andy. Oguz, all right, call to action, right? I'm a carrier, I'm a system integrator, I'm a software vendor. You know, where do I get started? How do I jump in? I mean, there's probably a lot of opportunity here, a lot of money to be made, a lot of good to be done. Oguz.
Yes. So, you know, there are multiple, this being a disaggregated architecture, there are multiple touch points, right? So, if you are interested in influencing the evolution of the specifications, there's of course 3GPP and ORAN Alliance. Both are great places to do that influence. If you want to get your hands dirty and also plug your solution, however small it is, into a big one that is being assembled, then you need to get to an open source consortium, ONF being one, ORAN OSC being another one, because there, you know, even if you are just an XApp developer, you can actually have that open source platform play a reference platform role for you, and you can quickly actually see and iterate and get your solution towards production grade. Actually, the open source platforms are also great in getting yourself visible by the telco or by the customers effectively. I mean, just to close up, in the June timeframe, for example, with SDRAN, we are going to have a trial, and that trial is going to be with a major tier 1 operator, and there's already more than half a dozen players, vendors, and open source solutions that we are assembling to have one end-to-end disaggregated in both dimensions, both RIC and RUDU-CU, operationalized in a true distributed cloud fashion. You know, you can definitely be a part of something big like that very, very quickly.
Excellent, Oguz. Well, many ideas, many opportunities. Andy, recommendations about how to get involved, how to get started.
So, yeah, I mean, I think all of the points, you know, absolutely valid. It's an industry momentum that we have to maintain. So, working with ORAN and the Telecom Infra Project, ONF and 3GPP are all critical to this. You know, I think the things that we need to focus on now with the platforms, especially from an operator point of view, is it's about the operational hardening of the platforms. Mm-hmm. Really, how do we do that? Well, the first thing for any operator is, as early as you can, start working with your operational teams, understand what their requirements are, and ensure that you have, you know, a clear line of sight to deliver those. The other critical area, I think, for us going forwards, and you know, we touched on cost and efficiencies, is the area of test and integration. You know, we need to have, through the industry, common approach to this, the sharing of results and information, so that we don't end up having multiple testing centers, you know, reproducing and replicating testing. That's not going to be efficient, and it's something that we're already looking at and working across the operators and the ecosystem to look at a process that we can implement that will enable a common test program. And I think that will really accelerate adoption, especially when you take that with operational tools, the automation and the intelligence that we're expecting to see. That really makes life a lot easier and helps us achieve our OPEX targets overall for the platform. And then going forwards, as operators start to roll out the commercial platforms, it's increasingly, or it continues to be important that we share our learnings and information both amongst ourselves so that we can further enhance what we're doing, but also learn from others' challenges, let's say, but also share that back into the vendor community so that we can continue to enhance platforms and make further improvements. The message, I think, to many operators out there, and there has been references, and we've touched on the complexity of the platform. The reality is that OpenRAN is not really any more complex than we see from our incumbent platforms today. All of the same components are out there. Our incumbent vendors are capable of bringing all of those components together and working. So just because we've disaggregated the platform doesn't mean that we're introducing things here that haven't previously been managed. So don't be scared of OpenRAN. We're busy doing an awful lot of work in developing solutions, processes, procedures, and having a common industry approach to its implementation that we're confident will deliver high performance mobile networks for all operators.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, I think disaggregation doesn't have to be feared, right? It's kind of like saying that, a PC in a disaggregated form is more complex than mainframes, right? Or a cloud data center with all the components is much more complicated than a mainframe. The components still exist, but by disaggregation, you've now built, multiple ecosystems, and that disaggregation of the OS from the hardware, commoditizing the hardware has led to sort of the mobile phone ecosystem, the PC ecosystem, the laptop ecosystem, the server ecosystem in data centers, ruggedized platforms and the like. And so I think, with the disaggregation of the RAN as sort of an access method, it opens up a whole world of possibilities. And so now I turn to Anand, and so all focus should be on him. What I'd like to do here actually is what are the keywords, right? Not maybe the key takeaways, but if I'm sitting in the audience and time sure went by fast, I didn't feel like it was, it's been like an hour and a half already, actually a little bit over that. But this has been a great discussion. Keyword takeaways, things like automation, security, virtualization, cloud platform, right? What are the keywords that came to mind that kept getting repeated over and over again as all the panelists had the discussion, right, and shared their thoughts? Anand, what would be your sort of list of keywords?
I will obviously twist your question, but and thank you for waking me up earlier. So I appreciate that.
It's a little late, I realize. Yeah. So for the panelists in the audience, Anand's in Japan, so we really appreciate you staying up through the wee hours of morning to be with us. So
good morning, everyone. So I mean, let me say a couple of points. Standards and utilization of those in the sense that all of you here who are listening, and then operators particularly, bring them to standard bodies, push them, valuable. Other thing, hearing, and maybe it's my mind that likes hearing that, is operators also getting ready for this change in situation, more clarification and things like that, and there's impacting the operational part as well. That's a longer term expense that comes in. And then what we are also seeing is that all this disaggregation and stuff like that means for vendors also to get ready with these aspects and see how interoperability will happen, and how integration will happen. And that's why we talked about operators, vendors, collaboration initially, then going down to the lower down to the chain. The thing I have to say that I have just heard myself mostly speaking is the security part. Topmost of the companies have to take care that security is important in holistic fashion, in terms of life cycle, in terms of organization aspect as well. And the other thing, of course, as you said, automation, extremely important. There are different factors here. It's automation means that finding right human resource very difficult. Automation helps you with that. Yeah, automation properly done also helps with the quality of the network. Yeah, helps you complete operations, and then also helps your security as well. So I guess with those maybe keywords, I'll stop now that I can keep on speaking.
Very good. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed, and I'm glad that you were able to share that. I wouldn't be able to operate, at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? I'd be probably just blubbering. But that was excellent. Thank you, Anand, and thank you, panelists. I'm going to close out this section of the panel. Really appreciate all your thoughts, sharing your insights, and the discussion that we've had. And I think, like I said, time sure went by fast. So at this point, I'm going to turn you over into the capable hands of Malad, who will be handling the Q&A portion of this panel. And thank you again. And I forgot to introduce myself at the very beginning, so I'll save it for last. I'm Roy Chua of AvidThink, a research and advisory service covering technology infrastructure. It's been a pleasure. Panelists, thank you again. And all right, over to you, Malad.
Thank you very much, Roy. Thank you. Much appreciated. So just looking at the Q&A box, to start with the first question from Vishnu. Vishnu says, some vendors have been talking about the use case specific shortcomings in OpenRAN, especially greenfield versus urban dense deployments. So he's looking for comments in this part. I think probably prudent to go to our two vendors here, Stefano and Anil, and see what you two think. Let's start with Stefano.
Well, I think the most important comment has been made in the past is because there have been big announcement of greenfield operators who have been adopting OpenRAN and then a bit more difficulties instead on brownfield. I think that first of all, the fact that a greenfield operator or most of greenfield operators have decided to go on OpenRAN just demonstrate that if you have to pick up a best technology, you go in that direction. So that's very clear. I don't think it requires any further explication. Now, in terms of the brownfield, I understand there are a lot of legacy deployed, and of course, the strategy to deploy in general a new vendor in an existing legacy is difficult. But it's not difficult just for OpenRAN. It's just difficult for any other vendor. And as such, there have been more consideration in that space. So that's as simple as such. But I personally don't think there is any specific reason beyond the fact that traditional brownfield operators, we call it, they have had a certain mindset in deploy, and they have deployed with a certain legacy. So the transition to a new way of deployment, it takes a bit more time. So it's just as simple as that. And some organizations are faster to move. Some other organizations are more slow to move. So that would be my really two-penny view. If I have, of course, we can say much more, but if I have to make an overall comment, that would be a very high-level comment, which is quite easy to understand for the audience.
Thank you, Stefano. Anil?
Stefano has covered greenfield versus brownfield aspect. Just one additional thing that I would want to highlight, I think the question is also referring to the greenfield versus dense urban deployments. And what I want to say here is that, again, OpenRAN, there's no shortcoming in terms of features, right? OpenRAN supports all the features which are there today with the traditional RAN vendors. And the deployment, going back to Rakuten deployment, right? Rakuten deployment is in Japan and in some of the densest cities in the world, like Tokyo and so on. Again, the performance is comparable, or in some cases even better than the other networks which are operational in those areas. So to summarize, what I'm just trying to say is that there is nothing that prevents OpenRAN from being deployed in dense urban environments compared to the traditional RAN architectures.
Thank you, Anil. Just to go to some of our operators. I mean, do you guys have, for example, Andrew, How do you feel about open? Obviously, Rakuten and Dish are really the two have done the greenfield deployment. How do you guys view that?
So for us, it's certainly not a niche product with niche application. What we're developing and our target for our implementations is that the OpenRAN becomes the platform that supports all of our deployment scenarios with the same digital hardware, with a variety of radio heads stretching from small cells through to full massive MIMO implementations. And the reason that we take that approach is that twofold. One is it's all about economies of scale. So we have to hit, our macro deployments for OpenRAN to really deliver the maximum value to an operator. But also it comes down to, wanting to maximize the flexibility of this new open platform to deliver that. And also very, very important is the operational benefits that we would gain from having just a single RAN platform supporting all of the deployment scenarios. It makes no sense to have to implement and support in-building solutions, stadium solutions on different platforms. We just have a single OpenRAN implementation, a single OSS. We manage the platform, and we take all of the full benefits. So no, we will start our first commercial deployment in the UK towards the end of this year. That's already been publicly announced, and you can see we will cover a significant proportion of the country, which will include for sure rural applications all the way through to dense urban city type applications, and supporting all technologies from 2G through to 5G. So yeah, we're not holding back on our plans and objectives for OpenRAN. It's truly a multi-technology, multi-capability open platform for us.
Thank you, Andy. I mean, as far as mobile operators go, I mean, do you deem it viable to deploy OpenRAN for just 5G and then have kind of two separate networks, or do you not see that as a viable strategy?
I think with this, it's market and operator dependent. Even across our broad markets, the economics vary quite considerably depending on their location and the implementation. So the good news is we have flexibility in the OpenRAN platform to accommodate operator needs in terms of the deployment models. Different opportunities will present themselves, and perhaps for 5G there will be a number of operators that see the opportunity for overlay, but then there's also a lot of operators out there wanting to do brownfield and greenfield deployments, in which case we need a full technology stack. So again, I don't see that there's any limitation, only really opportunity there for these different scenarios.
Thank you, Andy. A question from Rue. He says, what role does the OSS play in the current versus future OpenRAN networks? Who would like to take that?
I can just add a few words around this. I mean, it's a super critical area that we have to get the OpenRAN platform and OSS and associated tools up to a level of commercial readiness that we see with our incumbent platforms today. There's a lot of work going on. I think there's more work that can be done, and then as the panel has spoken about earlier, it's about driving automation, interoperability, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all these great sort of buzzwords, but that's the reality of where our platforms need to get to deliver cost-effective and world-class services to our customers. And we perhaps haven't mentioned that enough today, but that's the other driver for OpenRAN is we have to deliver a level of service here which is expected and hopefully will exceed our customer desires. So there's a lot of focus now on getting this platform to be both operationally ready, but at the same time remembering that we're delivering services to customers and they have very high expectations, and we're working hard to make sure that we meet all of those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Oguz, did you have anything to add to that?
Sure. So from at the end of the day, the OSS is a place where operators push down policies. And prior to OpenRAN, the OSS interfaces have all been not open. So basically, for every possible RAN solution, you had to have the necessary vendor-specific interfaces for OSS. And one of the things that ORAN Alliance is doing is defining actual open interfaces for that really important platform as well. And that is one of the big changes. And the second big change, of course, is we have talked about cloudification of the 5G network, right? So as a consequence, the types of policies and how they get translated into operationalization in a distributed cloud network is going to mean, an evolution of those OSS platforms themselves as well.
Thank you, Oguz. I have another question from Sergio. Sergio, can carriers or solutions providers comment on the importance of CPRI and CPRI, low PHY coercion for ROE mapping in general in a disaggregated front haul switch model? He goes on to say, is RE vendor IP needed to support low PHY conversion, a gate to disaggregated front haul network? Probably start with Andy and then go on to the solutions provider to see what they think.
So yeah, the L1 PHY is critical, really, an enabler for interoperability, an enabler for hopefully to enable a lower cost entry point to vendors into the RU space. We're working with a number of vendors at the moment looking to develop, well, actually it's silicon level vendors that we're working with to develop next generation implementations that will support the ORAN 7.2 front haul. And what we're seeing as a trend now in the industry, which is a very positive one, is that a number of these vendors are also introducing L1 PHY solutions, and quite often in a license-free mode, so removing some of the IP limitations, moving to FRAN models for that, as it's a key enabler really to enable the generation of these new radio products. So I think that's a very positive move that we're starting to see in the industry, and one that we're working hard to continue to support. And we expect to see more options, and in the future, even to the point where we could see different levels of performance, perhaps from L1 PHY vendors, and that's something that we'll be assessing. So it's a positive trend there, and it is key and part of the overall interoperability. But as I say, the industry is definitely moving in some very positive directions to reduce and remove that barrier.
Thank you, Andy. Anil?
So I think what Andy said, I agree with that. There is, there are multiple vendors who have emerged for ORU, and they have developed expertise over a period of time implementing the lower PHY. Over and above that, I think the question also referred to front haul gateway. I guess the reference probably was to interoperability with Cpr Radios. So we have seen some activity in that area as well, where existing Cpr Radios, those are being connected to front haul gateways, and these front haul gateways are implementing lower PHY and providing ORAN front haul interface towards the ODUs. So I mean, the second model also does exist.
Thank you, Anil. Stefano, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just can add that, I think the last comment of Anil on the possibility to reutilize existing deployment of radios in the market by mapping the Cpr onto a Cpr is something that, it's critical and could be essential if the legacy vendors will ever open their Cpr interface. We, in the past as Mavenir, we have started in that way some years ago when we started the initial things, and we developed our CUDU by having a 7.2 interface, and then we have adapters in order to be able to map onto Cpr. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there are some initiative, and we as a Mavenir, we are pushing hard to try to develop open source software to manage on RU's 7.2 interface and the O&M model that Oguz was talking about, in order to get IPR free, software such that RU's vendors can actually focus on their analog expertise and develop their IPR in the analog space, and don't have to worry much about the interworking softwares towards the DU and so on, which will help as well in that space to boost the amount of RUs available and interoperability as well. So there are different initiatives, and I think any of those initiatives will actually help it to boost in that space.
Thank you, Stefano. Oguz, anything you'd like to say in that respect?
I think, not really. I mean, we have everything that needs to be said is already said at this stage.
Fantastic. I don't think we've got any more questions, but as all of these videos will be going online on demand on their 123 YouTube channel and on the Resource Center on the website, we will always get questions coming in, and I'll be happy to forward these on if anybody's interested in getting in touch with those individuals to give them any feedback. But I would just like to relay my thanks to Roy and Daniele, who are not here, but obviously to you guys, Anil, Stefano, Anand, Oguz. Alex is gone as well now at this point. But this session was fantastic, and all the previous ones, including this one, will be available as mentioned. And we hope to welcome everybody to future Layer 123 events, including our Layer 123 Europe Congress, which will be on the 12th to 14th of April in collaboration and partnership with Telefónica and Etsy. And you'll find more information on this on the Layer 123 website on how to register. Thank you all, and we wish to welcome you back soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.